Yo, 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 what's going on, good people? It's your homie Herbman. Here you back upside the head with another hot banger boogie. Hey man, I hope you guys are doing great out there in the world. We love all the support that you guys have been giving us. We ask that you continue to follow the YouTube page. Continue to follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And you have any questions, we always do the hashtag Ask Herbman, and we'll be prompt to try to answer any questions that you may have, anything that we can help you in. All right. Now, if this is your first time tuning in to the Herbman Show, I want you to go ahead and hit that logo right at the bottom of your screen right there and hit that notification bell so that you never ever miss what we bring to the table here on these platforms. All right. So with that being said, we're going to be talking about food addictions today. All right. Now, there's still, some contention out there whether food addictions are actually real or not, or they're just a figment of our imagination. I want to just voice my opinion on the matter. I believe that food addiction has a lot to do with a lot of why we're in some of these health ruts that we may be facing, okay? And a lot of it is we may not even know that we're addicted to certain types of food. We may not even understand that it is the same type of addiction as some of these common things that we know of, like drug addictions or alcohol addiction. But it does handle the brain in some of the same fashions as some of those other addictions. I mean, we're talking about dopamine, and dopamine is when you feel rewarded or satisfied, okay, with a particular thing. And so that connection between the gut and the brain definitely comes into play when we're talking about food addictions, all right? So we already know that the gut has the second largest amount of neurons in it aside from the brain, okay? Which is why you probably heard of you had this gut feeling, okay? It's because your gut does have neurotransmitters in them, all right? And so with that being said, there's a communication that happens between the gut and the brain, or between the stomach and the brain. And I believe that this is where food addictions may come into play, okay? When we get satisfied with a certain food, a particular food. Now, there are a list of foods out there that they say are very addictive, like the processed foods, but I tend to like to use them in three categories, all right? And one is going to be sugar, the next is going to be salt, and the next is going to be dairy. All right. And when we're talking about processed foods and when we're talking about health, you probably heard over and over and over people tell you to stay away from sugar, salt, and dairy products. And a lot of it is because a lot of those things are into all the processed foods. So when you're talking about chips, or when you're talking about French fries, or that's to me, that's salt. OK, when you're talking about candy, cakes and cookies and ice cream, all of that is sugar. But also too, when those are dairy, ice cream, cheese, okay? We're talking about white bread, and okay, that's sugar, okay? Because all this stuff breaks down into mostly sugar in your system. But aside from that, you have a lot of these cravings. When you have your food cravings, it's mostly you want to eat a particular potato chip at a certain particular time of the week or the day. You need ice cream at a certain particular time. Maybe right before you go to bed at night, you got to have that dessert. You got to have that ice cream. You got to put cheese on everything. You got a taste for bread. I've seen a lot of bread eaters. They just got to have bread for breakfast, bread for lunch, bread for dinner, bread with a soup, bread with salad. You just got to have that bread, And so, but we're not realizing that we may be addicted to these foods. It is not necessarily the ingredients in the food necessarily, but it's just your body and how you're reacting to these particular products. All right. Now, so a lot of times when we have these cravings, we may be having them when we're in highly stressed situations, or when we're very sad, or when we're very angry, okay? Now, these emotions also attach themselves to these addictions, right along with why people do drugs or why people drink alcohol. It's mostly to relieve them of some type of stress, or it's because they're sad or because they're angry, and this is the way they handle those emotions. So food is no different. We sometimes eat out of these particular three categories when they arrive in our lives, and we don't really understand it. We don't really see those things happening. So what I want to talk about is not just what are food addictions, but how can we overcome these things. You know, people who drink coffee in the morning, got to have your coffee. Your day don't go right if you ain't got that coffee, you know. And so that can also be a sign of a food addiction. You need this at a particular time every day. You got to have it. You know, just like smoking a cigarette. You know, some people can go throughout the day with just smoking one. Some people need a whole pack a day. Some people need it right after, you know, they clock in, and then an hour later they're going to need to smoke a cigarette, and an hour after that they're going to need to smoke a cigarette, and an hour after that they're going to need to smoke a cigarette. And so you can consume food in the same way. So what we're talking about here is a overconsumption of food, okay? Not just an overconsumption of food, but having, you know, obsessive food cravings, you know, where you just got to have something. You know, if your day won't go right unless you go out and get these French fries or something like that. And also, too, just seeing throughout your day. You know, and what we're talking about here is some of the symptoms where you could just see throughout your day that you're just being preoccupied with thinking about food. You just all day long, you just thinking about what to eat, when to eat it, why to eat it. And a lot of this stuff can happen to you. Some of it could be also, some symptoms could be that you've lost control over your eating habits. You know, you just can't reel yourself back in to eating the right things. Okay. You know, you're just all over the place when it comes to food. And, you know, when we're talking about obesity and when we're talking about our health, you know, one of the major factors, and I'll go back to this point, is that we're overeating, we're over consuming food. You know, you're only really supposed to eat when you're hungry, not when you're stressed, not when you're sad, not when you're angry, but only when you're hungry. Okay. So right then that let us know that we're over consuming. A lot of us could probably get away with eating one time a day, you know, and especially when we're sick, especially when we're dealing with some type of ailment, we want to cut back on the consumption of food so that we can allow our bodies to occupy itself with the ailment. Okay. If you're constantly eating, your brain and your gut is constantly manufacturing the products and the enzymes and all of this stuff that it needs to facilitate the eating. Okay. So it rarely has time to go and cure an ailment or cure a sickness that you got in your body, because it's consumed with processing the food that you're eating. And when you continue to allow your body to be inundated with processing of food, then it cannot allow the time and the energy toward healing your body. So I just gave you a tidbit secret right there. When you're dealing with any type of bodily issue, you need to allow the body to focus on healing the issue. And how you do that is you give it a time out from food processing. These bodies, that's all they are, just big food processors. Okay. And if all you're thinking about doing is eating, and all you're thinking about doing is drinking, and all you're thinking about doing is consuming, then all it does is pay attention to the processing of those habits. So it never ever really has time to take care of the arthritis. You never give it time to take care of the diabetes. For diabetics, a lot of that could be taken care of with eating one good meal a day. And not over consuming so that your body can come back to some kind of normal levels. But if you're always drinking and you're always eating, and so you're just sending your sugar just continue to spike and come up and come down and come up and stay up and come up and go down and stay down, then it never ever has time to normalize, because you're constantly consuming, and you're consuming things that you shouldn't be consuming: salt, sugar, and dairy. All right. And out of those three things are heavily inundated into processed foods. Okay? And even if you're vegan and you're eating processed vegan foods, you're still going to run into some of these same issues. Okay? Processed foods is processed foods no matter what diet you're on, no matter what you prefer to call yourself when you're eating things. If it's processed, it's processed. Okay? And these processes are going to have some kind of bioaccumulation at some particular point. And so we have found ourselves been addicted to certain things based on a lot of it, our emotional state. Okay? Now, what is your emotional state? It has a lot to do with, again, the brain. Okay? So when we're talking about how to treat, now we went from what it is, the symptoms, to now how to treat. You have to have some kind of psychological understanding of what is going on. And what I mean is that you have to understand that it's more mental. Why do I eat when I feel sad? Why am I sad? Why do I eat when I feel angry? Why am I angry? Why do I eat when I feel stressed? Why am I stressed? And so when you can handle why you're stressed and why you're sad and why you're angry, then you may be able to get to why you eat when you're those things. So it's a kind of fallback where you have to go back to the beginning, okay? You have to go back to the root cause of the stress, the root cause of the anger, and the root cause of the sadness first. Then we can deal with the addiction to the food in those emotional states. Now, we're all going to get stressed and we're all going to get sad at particular points, and we all may get angry at certain things, but we still want to deal with the cause. And if you can deal with it from a psychological standpoint, way before you have to treat it with food, then you may not have to treat it with anything. You may be able just to deal with the stress alone by understanding what has caused it and move past it from a psychological standpoint. What has caused me to stress? Whatever that cause is, I'm going to remove it from my life or my day or my mental. Whatever caused me to be sad, I'm going to remove it. But I'm going to remove it mentally first. Then physically, I will remove myself from the situation so that I don't have to necessarily treat it with something because I'm still in the situation. So because you're still in the stressful situation and you're not removing yourself from it, you then treat while being inside of the situation. So food doesn't relieve the stress. It doesn't relieve the stress. It's just a coping mechanism that you are doing to cope with what you're doing. It's the same way with drugs and alcohol. They don't remove the anger, the sadness, or the situation at hand. They just coping mechanisms for you to cope with what you're dealing with. So we have to learn how to fight a mental battle with a mental battle, and not necessarily with drugs, alcohol, or food. We have to learn how to fight our emotional battles with our emotions. We have to learn how to treat a situation the right way, which is removing the situation, removing the issue, removing the problem, removing the sadness, removing the anger, removing ourselves from the feeling by simply changing our mentality about how we're going to handle things. Instead of staying in them, we need to remove ourselves from them, or remove the people or the things or the places that are doing this to us, so that we don't do things to ourselves that would cause us bad health in the end. And when you get physically in a rut, for a lot of us, sometimes it's too late. And for some of us, we can catch it And we can recognize it and we can understand what we're doing to ourselves. And therefore we make the subtle changes. But for a lot of us, we don't understand it. We don't know what we're doing to ourselves until it's too late. And then you end up with going to the doctor one day and they say you have cancer or you have a tumor, a benign tumor, or you have, arthritis, in your system, or you have diabetes now. Because you were treating your situation with food instead of removing the emotions that are causing it, instead of changing it from a mentality standpoint, from a psychological platform. Coping mechanisms. And we have to learn that these coping mechanisms are causing us health issues. It's not necessarily stress that'll cause you the health issues. It's what you do under stress. What do you do? How do you react to stress? We're talking about this thyroid epidemic. Has a lot to do with stress. Okay? We're talking about obesity. Has a lot to do with how we are coping with the stress and the sadness and the anger that life brings. And so again, it is a mental disorder, not necessarily in the fashion that we know mental disorder to be, but it is a mental disorder, meaning that it is not in the proper order of how we thinking on things, how we are chronologically combating things. That when this happened, what do you do to that? What do you do for that? All right, you have to change it. If you're stressed here, then you need to relax. If you're sad, you need to be happy. If you're angry, you need to change that. Okay, so you have to deal with it from a mental standpoint, not a physical. So we're handling mental disorders with physical things that are causing us more mental disorder. So you handle mental with mental, spiritual with spiritual, physical with physical. You can't try to handle all of your issues that may come in a mental or a spiritual capacity with physical things, physical cravings and physical treatments. So if this is a psychological issue, it needs to be handled by psychological therapies. If this is a physical issue, it can need to be handled by physical therapies. And if it's a spiritual issue, it needs to be handled by spiritual therapies. So one of the cool things about being a herbalist and being someone who's very, very keen on the holistic value that we should always bring into our health care, then this is why mental, physical, and spiritual therapies all should be encompassed under medicine, period. Any type of treatment, we got to go back to the root cause of it. If it's a mental disorder, then we need to find out how to put things back in order in the mental phase of life, first and foremost. And then we take care of the physical. But a lot of times when we can put back in order the mental state, everything else kind of take care of itself. Because now you're thinking about what you're thinking about. Now you're combating it at the first phase, which is here, way before it get to here. And when you can think right, then you eat right. So I want you guys to understand what is a food addiction and why we need to understand that it may be causing us a lot of the health issues. Okay? And if you guys have any more questions on the matter, please #ask Herbman and let us know, man. But until next time, I love you guys and it's absolutely nothing you can do about it. I'm your homie Herbman. Peace.